latest game. This is game 6 of our Crisis in May campaign game, where Napoleon has launched his assault early against the British forces, not waiting till June for the Waterloo campaign, but advancing in May. And actually there was quite a lot, as you might have seen if you've been watching the campaign, there was quite a lot of concern amongst the Allies that indeed Napoleon may go early. So he has in our campaign, and he thrust across the Sambre at Charleroi and has driven north. And there have been a number of combats. The last two comprehensive ones was a rebuff for his 1st and 2nd Division as they assaulted the Prussians at Ligny, but a success for his 3rd and 4th Divisions with the Guard, who assaulted the Dutch Belgians at the Quatre Bras position. What Napoleon then has chosen to do, unlike historically, is swing to the east with his Guard, and he is now trying to crush the Prussians, and this has given the opportunity for the British to counterattack. So what we have on the table today are the blocking forces Napoleon left at Quatre Bras. So we have the 3rd and 4th Divisions. On this flank of the table, we've got the 3rd Division, and you're really starting to see the effects of the campaign play out here. So the 3rd Division's battalions are really looking remarkably weak here. So looking at this element of this brigade, we've got a battalion of 4 and 3 bases. 3 bases makes that a small battalion. And again, for the other part of the brigade, we've got 4 and 3 battalions there. These all started 6 bases strong. So these battalions have already taken pretty much 2/3 to 50% casualties, and many more casualties in this game, and they'll no longer be fit for combat. We've got a slightly stronger brigade to the left, holding the village of Juminecourt. So we have 1 battalion and some engineers in possession of the village, another battalion in support, and 2 more in reserve. Again, these are all worn down, they're 4-figure bases, but still fighting at pretty much normal combat efficiency. On the right flank, we're supported by an artillery battery for the 3rd Division, and we've also got a cuirassier heavy cavalry brigade, which was implied in the earlier fighting but never got into combat and has not taken any losses. Over on the left flank for the French, we have another division. This is the 4th Division, and again, some weaker battalions, another 3 base strong battalion there, some slightly stronger battalions here on the far left flank, and then another artillery battery. Again, we've got some cuirassiers over here, another 2 regiments, 2 small regiments of cuirassiers on the left flank. Facing these, we've got the Allied forces. We have the 2nd Division here. This is a pretty strong division with plenty of good quality troops. So we have, I think they are the 52nd Oxfordshire Light, a very large battalion there, and supported by another battalion of British infantry. Then we've got the 71st Highland Light Infantry, supported by 3 more British battalions. And then we have the start of the KGL Brigade, which is also available, 2 battalions of KGL troops just coming on table with their 2 more veteran light battalions in their support. And then we also have on this flank the 5th British Division. More familiar with my battalion numbers here, so we got 4 battalions here. These are 2 battalions of Highlanders, the Royal Scots, and I think that one at the back is the Essex. They're all veterans. And on this flank we have the 95th Light in skirmish. We have the Gloucesters, another Highlander battalion, and the Cornwall Regiment, I think. So the Cornwall and the Gloucesters are regulars, the Highlanders and the Rifles, again, are veterans on this flank. Supporting these, we have 2 more brigades of Hanoverians, and they're in the boxes behind the table, sitting on that chair in the corner. And then on the windowsill you can see some more figures in the distance. That's our Household Cavalry Brigade. So we've got 4 Guard battalions of British cavalry. So good competition for the cuirassiers. All right, we'll do some pre-game artillery bombardment. The aim of the British is to smash the French, recapture Quatre Bras, and basically break Napoleon's blocking force and outflank him and unhinge his position further to the east. The objective for the French is to hang on, throw back this British assault, and allow Napoleon to destroy the Prussians with a bit of peace and quiet. Alright, let's see how this game plays out. I'll just do the pre-game artillery. On reflection, we did 4 turns of pre-game artillery fire, so effectively simulating a 5-foot table width rather than the just over 4 foot we've got here. That's allowed the British lines to advance, and because the British have advanced in lines rather than columns, yeah, I know they could have gone in columns, but I've decided they came forward in lines, so it took them an extra turn to get to their on-table positions. So we've done 4 turns of artillery fire. We've taken quite a few casualties against part of this right-hand brigade, and again a few more casualties against the right-hand brigade of the 2nd Division. So no discipline tests or anything like that, and the French artillery in the centre here has gone low on ammunition at the end of turn 4. So we'll kick off with turn 5 and ADCs, and see who's got initiative and how they move out. Alright, just had to film it. Terrible roll for the French, only 1 ADC at the start of this turn. Let's see how the Allies do. Okay, and for the Allies, we've got 4 on-table ADCs activated. All our off-table ADCs failed to activate. So 4 ADCs to 1, we'll do those allocations and brigade activation and come back with initiative. The Allies went bold and the whole of the 5th Division had infantry assault placed on it. So we needed 2 ADCs for this brigade. We rolled and it went off. And we need 2 ADCs for this brigade. It also went off and activated. That used all our ADCs up, so unfortunately our brigade here on the right is hesitant, as are our KGL, but our brigade entering the woods is active. For the French, all of their brigades, despite only having 1 ADC, are active, with the exception of the cuirassiers on the left. So the Allies are at -2 and the French are at -1 for our number of hesitant brigades. Okay, so that's a draw, and given this is the first turn of the game, we'll roll off again. Okay, so the Allies get a 6, that goes down to a 5. The French get a 7, sorry, goes down to a 4. The French get a 7, that goes down to a 6. So the French have initiative for turn 5. Don't think there'll be any charges, but there might well be some firing. Starting on the left, the French left-hand brigade has moved forward a bit. These 2 battalions in the lead have moved up to this hedge line with a battalion in the support. Another battalion has started edging up into the woods, and we've edged our cuirassiers forward a bit, hopefully to avoid any bounce through, but be more in support distance. For the Allies, the very large 52nd Light has formed itself into a column. I'm not quite sure what tactics it's going to take, but decided it would move potentially more swiftly through these woods. Otherwise, these other forces for the Allies on this flank were hesitant, so have stayed in position. But over as we move to the centre, the British have moved up on their infantry assault orders towards Jumincourt Farm, and their other brigade is moving up on the right. The French, however, have responded and have moved their cuirassier brigade to the far right flank, potentially for a flank assault on those British infantry and to try and pin them down before the British heavies arrive on table. Alright, so that's it for movement. Early repositioning, now time for some fire. So the French skirmish screens have fired off reasonably ineffectually, so and indeed as have the Allies. So a couple of casualties either side from skirmisher fire. First artillery will be our battery here, firing against, I think we're going to go for the Highland Battalion again, as that's the greater threat, as they are the veterans. And we roll a 7, that's a long distance shot, so you need a 4, 5 or 6 to convert. That's 1 casualty on the Highlanders, and a bounce through casualty as well, so not a bad bit of firing with that gun. 2 casualties on the Allies. We'll then fire the second French battery. This one is low on ammunition, so that'll be a -2. It's going to fire at the Cornwalls. I think it's the Cornwalls down there opposite them. This is at effective range. They're on a 7, that will go down to a 5 at effective range. 1 casualty on the Cornwalls, and a bounce through, yes, and a bounce through as well. So 4 casualties from the French artillery fire in total. So for the Allies, we've got 2 foot batteries here for the 5th Division. They're going to both fire at this French battalion. Let's see how they do. We'll do one with blue dice, one with red dice, roll both at the same time. All right, we get a 3, which will be a fatigue casualty, and a 9, which is a bit better. At effective range, that's 2 casualties on the French and a discipline test. No modifiers on this discipline test, and they stay steady. Right, mark those casualties up, and that's the British battery from the 5th Division. And our 2nd Division battery is going to fire. It's going to fire at this French battalion behind the hedge. Let's see how we do. It's at effective range, so those skirmishers will make no difference. An 8 becomes a 7 because of the cover from the hedge line. That's 1 casualty against the French. All right, that's it firing. There are no melees this turn. That's the end of turn 5. On we go with the 2nd turn. Here we are for the activation rolls, and despite the superior number of brigades of the Allies, the French have come up on top. They've got 4 ADCs to allocate. The Allies have got 3. I think the French will probably go for some combination of artillery support and re-provisioning their gun battery with its ammunition supply. The Allies might well use those 3 ADCs to bring their heavy cavalry onto the table, because we don't want to leave those off too long, and it is a really powerful force if the Allies are going to attack. So I think that's what we'll do. Let's do activations and see where we are. A bit of a turnaround this time. Russ have failed activations on the French side, so actually I think our cuirassiers, I moved them in error. They should have been hesitant last turn, so I'll edge it back a bit. The brigade behind the wood line is, behind the hedge line here, is active for the French. The cuirassiers are hesitant. This infantry brigade is hesitant. In the farm, the French brigade is hesitant, along with its supports outside the farm. This brigade is active, as are the cuirassiers. So 3 hesitant French brigades. For the Allies, we did activate our reserves, and then none of our brigades had rerolls, but fortunately for the British, they got the luck this turn. So their 2 brigades with infantry assault orders are active, as is their brigade that was hesitant last turn, and the KGR. But just for a change, the lights on the right flank have gone hesitant instead. But here we are in the end, with the French being at -3 and the Allies at -1 for activation. The Allies have initiative. Let's see what they do in turn 6. So the French cuirassiers moved up to the river line, but realised that the banking and the vegetation across the Chemincourt stream was too severe for them to be able to execute a charge across it. So they'll have to stay as a counterattack force. Meanwhile, the Allies have moved forward and are now in engagement range of the French skirmishers in the river. The 95th Rifles have pushed across the stream to start engaging this French battalion and perhaps the artillery. Over here, more French skirmishers are going to engage the British. The British heavy cavalry have arrived in a pretty central position, potentially to consider where to supply support once the British manage to get over the stream, and otherwise the rest of the British force continues to deploy forward. All right, that's it for movement, no charges, and artillery fire and musketry from the Allies. Okay, so we are just progressing through skirmisher and artillery fire on the left-hand flank. The French skirmishers here caused sufficient casualties on the 52nd to cause them to become disordered as a result of rolling a 6 on their skirmisher fire table. We've caused another casualty on their Allied artillery battery. The French have caused some casualties on this battalion, and the British guns have caused 3 casualties, but the unit passed its discipline test down behind the hedge here. So casualties starting to mount up in the centre. No casualties into the garrison this turn, and nothing particularly from the return fire. The British artillery on the right flank did 5 casualties on this French battalion behind the stream, but it passed its break test. We've now just fired at the French guns. They're going against the Cornwall, and they have just rolled a 6. This is a shot at effective range, so that's 4 casualties and a discipline test. So the Cornwall are not a veteran unit, but they have rolled a 12. So they have passed their discipline test, but will take 4 casualties. And for the bounce through, we cause 1 more casualty with the bounce through, and then as we rolled a as we rolled a 6, we also get a Destiny test. We've rolled a 5, which is we recover a casualty. And yes, the guns have taken 2 casualties, so they're down to 1. So we get some benefit from that. I'll mark the casualties up on the Cornwall. Really disastrous turn for activation for the British. All these brigades on the left-hand side went hesitant this turn, so there'll be no forward moves for them. For the French, our front infantry brigade here has gone hesitant, as is our brigade on the right. Our cuirassiers are active, but there isn't really any gaps for them to move forward on. So not much movement there on the left, as all sides have gone into immobility. A bit of a pause on the left flank. The garrison of Jumièges is also hesitant for the French, but their cuirassiers and brigade on the right here is active. And for the Allies, the heavy cavalry on their left is hesitant, but both the attacking infantry brigades are active. So we have numerous inactive brigades. Let me just tot those up and we'll roll for initiative in turn. Okay, so the Allies are at a magnificent -4, the French are at a -3. All right, the French have initiative as we go into, it's actually turn 7, part of my counter. All right, let's see what we do. French have initiative, what they're going to get up to this turn. The assaulting starts. 28th Gloucesters are charging this French infantry regiment. They will have to take an extra casualty for charging over the difficult terrain, but they were only on 1 casualty. So they charge across the river. First they'll hit the skirmisher screen. They have to do a leadership test or take 1d3 casualties. They failed the test, so they do take d3 casualties. They will lose a base, and then they fall back behind their formed infantry colleagues. All right, and then the Gloucesters will move into the charge. Okay, so quite a complicated set of charges. We started off with the Gloucesters, who have charged this small French battalion down here. We have a rear support available to commit to one of these 2 attacks. The Cornwall have attacked this larger French battalion. The French battalion is in support range. The Cornwall aren't in charge range, but only support range of the North Gloucesters. So I'll say that again. North Gloucesters charge this unit. The Cornwalls are in support but not in charge range. This defensive unit is in support range and can fire a defensive volley in support. And I think this gun battery can also fire at the Cornwall. It would seem to make sense as they're moving up to their front and they are part of the charge and a support to the charge. So we will charge, we will have a rear support and a flank support. We'll have defensive fire from this small battalion, defensive fire from this battalion, and supporting fire from this artillery battery. Second set of charges over here, the Royal Scots, a veteran unit, have charged over the river against this battalion, and we'll have to adjudicate whether there's any supporting fire from this French battalion here, but it is certainly a support to the combat. And then 3 more battalions have charged in against the built-up area. Only 1 unit can go into combat. We'll see how that does as we engage in the combat in the village. So let's start at this end of the table. We'll kick off with defensive fire from the French infantry battalions. First, an inferior volley from the small battalion. Okay, here we go with an inferior volley. Pretty good. We roll a 9 on an inferior volley. There's 2 casualties and a discipline test on the Gloucesters, my home battalion. The Gloucesters are now on 4 casualties. So this will be a discipline test at -1. Let's see how the British do. They roll a 12, that's pretty good. They will continue in good order. All right, now we'll do a supporting volley against the battalion opposite from this slightly larger French battalion. They've taken 4 casualties, so this will be at -1. That's a 9, that goes down to an 8. For a standard volley is 3 casualties against the Cornwall. This is bad news for the Cornwall. That takes them up to 8 casualties. Sorry, takes them from 8 to 11 casualties. And we've got the guns to go down. And I think this foot artillery battery can fire in support of this French infantry battalion, as it's within 3 inches and is in the combat. So let's see how they do. This will be a close range shot. It's a bit of a disaster for the French. We nearly wiped that battalion out, but that is so bad, I don't think that'll be any effect. So a 3, no, that's a fatigue casualty for the artillery battery. They clearly weren't ready for the charge, and that will be it for firing. Okay, now let's check what the charge reactions are. I always find charge is complicated when we've got this many units involved. I think I just need to start again and recap and try and get it right. So what you do is you do all the firing. So we cause 2 casualties from this battalion, 3 casualties from that. The way you allocate casualties, if all units are susceptible to them, is you take the majority on the attacking unit and then you split the rest across the supports. So on 5 casualties, the majority are 3, so we take 3 casualties on the North Gloucesters, we take 1 casualty on the Cornwall and 1 casualty on the Highlanders. That takes the Cornwall on to 9, so not quite as parlous, but still taking a lot of damage. So we've taken 3 casualties this turn on the Chargers, the Gloucesters, that will be -2, and they're now up to 5 casualties, so that will take them to an adjusting modifier of -3. All right, we'll now check for the rest of the modifiers and see what the French modifiers are. So I think the modifiers are simply -2 to the Allies, so net +2 to the French for the charge results. So let's roll 2 dice, and the Allies will get 2 re-rolls for their 2 supports, and everything is formed, so there'll be full value re-rolls. The French get 1 re-roll for their support. Let's roll the French dice first. Remember, these are at net +2. That's a 9. I don't think we're going to get a re-roll, but we will take the +2, which takes us up to an 11. Let's see how the British charge does. We get a 7. We'll do a re-roll, a 6, and our second re-roll takes us to an 8. That will be not enough to break the French defences. So that's an 8 against an 11. That's a net result of -3. So the attacker retires and takes 1 casualty. All right, we'll do those retire results. Yeah. So the first British attack has been rolled back, and to some extent they've masked their own guns as they've pulled back from that line. Let's do the next charge down here. We don't have any supports for the British in this one. The French will have a support from their small battalion that is their colleague here. Now let's do the defensive volley from the French as the British come charging across the river. The French roll an 8. So what do we get with an 8? Let's just have a look at the table. All right, so standard volley for an 8, that's 3 casualties on the attacking British. That takes their casualties from 2 up to 5. So the French are going to wheel their small battalion on the right slightly, which they can do as a charge reaction, and that means both battalions will be able to do defensive fire. So we'll fire our small battalion as well. This will be an inferior volley at -1. That's a 4, but because of their 5 casualties, that goes down to a 3. That'll be a loss of fire discipline and no extra casualties on the Allies. Okay, so on this charge, it'll be +3 to the French because of the casualties they inflicted. There's no brigadier, though, for the French to allocate, as he fought over here to drive off the other attack. For the Allies, we might as well put our brigadier in because we don't do a charge reaction for going into a building, so there's no benefit for allocating the brigadier to the assault on Gemicourt. So we'll add the Allies brigadier and the fact that they are veterans, so that will give them a +2. So this means this will be a straight roll-off, but the French do have supports. Wow, pretty good. Charge result of a 12, so that'll be a destiny test. The French will re-roll the 1. They get an 8. So the Allies have 1 by 4. So they take the ground and the French are driven back, and we'll also have a destiny test. And they're driven back and take 2 casualties. Okay, so we'll need to move the British forward to take the ground. Actually, I think they will move forward. They'll move across the river line. So we moved the retiring unit back first, so that went back 12 inches. Then our retreating unit fell back 6. It should go back 21, which would have taken it off the table, but because it had a formed unit to its rear from the same brigade, it could form up behind its retiring support. I think I got that right. So it took 3 casualties from the retreat, and a retiring unit takes 1 casualty. And I did just check, and all the British retiring units, the supports retire as well. And on the retire order in combat, each unit who's retiring takes 1 casualty. So popped a couple more casualties onto the British over there. So success so far, and the British can move forward across the river. All right, now we'll do standard firing, as that's all the charges completed for this turn. So we're going to start with the French artillery. We're going to have a go at trying to clear away the annoying 90-fish rifles that are to our front. So that's a bit -2. That's a 7. At close range, that goes down to a 5. And maybe 1 casualty on the 95th Rifles. Close range, 1 casualty indeed on the 95th Rifles from the French artillery. The garrison can fire at the attacking British infantry as they closed in, so we'll do some defensive fire from the garrison. No 5s or 6s. They fight like skirmishers, so no effect from that. Down here we've got the French artillery again. It's going to go up against the closest target, this battalion at effective range. That's a 7 and a 6 for a bounce through. I think that's probably 1 casualty on each. And the rest of the French skirmishers did not cause any casualties. So the 95th Rifles will have a go against the guns. There are 4 bases there. That would normally mean 3 dice firing as the 95th Rifles. So they get a bonus dice. Let's see how they do against the gun crews. 1 more casualty against this battery, but it's still firing at full effect. Then we've got the 2 artillery batteries that are opposite it. And they are going to do counter battery fire, I think. So this will be at -2. We'll do 1 in white and 1 in red. Let's see how they do. Ah, that is good rolling for the French. So that's a 7 after the -2 adjustment and a 9 after the -2 adjustment. We'll just check the range and work out those casualties. Was it effective range? That's 3 casualties and a discipline test, and the discipline test will be at -1. They roll a 4, that goes down to a 3. That's a retreat. Unfortunately for the French, those guns break under the weight of counter battery fire. There's a big hole in the French line on the right now. Right, and then the British battery down here as open fire caused 2 more casualties on the French battalion behind the hedge line, and they have gone unformed. That's it. That's the end of turn 7. Let's see what happens as we move on to turn... Oh no, we don't move on to turn 8. We've got combat in the village. Let's see how that goes as the British try and fight their way in to Gemicourt. So the fight for the farm commences. Highlanders yelling and screaming, charge over the walls. Can the French throw them back? They are veterans, but they are assaulting a defended position, and there are engineers, so the French should get an extra dice for the engineers. The French don't do too well. They only cause 2 casualties, and the Highlanders cause 3. Charlie's just arrived, and he's going to roll for the second round of combat. So when you're fighting built-up areas and you only win by 1, you do drive a second round of combat. Because this is a strong point and not a built-up area, neither side can actually roll add supports. So the French get 5 dice, the Allies get 6. French do terribly. Only 1 casualty on the Allies.
Allies did 3.
Allies did 3. The French are thrown out of Gemicourt. The Highlanders, under Charlie's discerning command, have thrown the French out. They've fallen back outside of the village. They did have a support just behind the village, so they're able to rally behind that, so they haven't disappeared off the table. And we did check for the general, and the general, the brigadier, survived. So that's it for melee. That's the end of that turn. Let's start turn. So for the French, 2 of our infantry brigades on the left are hesitant, but we have got infantry assault off on our brigade just outside Gemicourt Farm, so they can counter-attack and try and retake it. But we do have our really important falter test to do for my right flank. We roll a 5. I think that's obey orders. We'll take that one. We won't have the reroll, and we are simply active. All right, so I'm on -2 for my test. Charlie, what were you on? -2. French get a 9.
Initiative.
French have initiative. All right, French charges. Okay, so the French are counter-attacking using their infantry assault orders. They're going to try and fight their way back into Gemicourt Farm, see if we can achieve that. That's the only charge for the turn. We'll now do normal movement. So Charlie provided some orders and has moved off to go and watch some footy. So he's holding back with this brigade. It has taken pretty heavy casualties as a result of being thrown back on that assault. The British artillery will continue firing from there. We formed this British battalion, the Royal Scots, into square because of the threat of the French cuirassiers that are moving across from the left. We're moving the Essex up in support. The Highlanders in the village remain unformed, having been charged by the French this turn, but we have moved our other Highland battalion up into march column. Being veterans, they can change formation, and they're moved up across the bridge. We've got the opportunity of coming across the bridge by the British cavalry. Otherwise, they are thinking about swooping around the left here, so you can see the British heavy cavalry redeploying to potentially take advantage of this more open terrain here, where they're on reflection. Charlie decided they had been badly deployed by his dad, and are going to potentially use their offensive might on this flank. Otherwise, the British forces over here are all faltering, so again an opportunity for the French to cause more damage with their skirmishers and their artillery. Can they hold the British assault off? We'll see how we move into this next turn. That's movement complete. Now they've opened up fire. The French artillery battery here caused another casualty on the British lines that are hesitant in front of them. French skirmishers caused another casualty or two on the lights and the British battery over there. Again, we took a few more casualties in our defensive line down here. Final bit of firing in the turn will be the two British batteries firing at long range against the cuirassiers across the river. This will be at -1 and at long range because they're firing through terrain. So a 5 becomes a 4, that'll be no effect. A 9 becomes an 8 at long range, which will be 1 casualty on the cuirassiers. First casualty on the cuirassiers this turn. That's it for firing. Final action of the turn will be the French counter-attacking. Can they recapture Gemicourt? Okay, so the Highlanders lose 1 dice for being unformed, the French lose 1 dice for attacking a built-up area, and the French are veterans. So, sorry, the British are veterans. So the British cause 2 casualties, French cause 2 casualties. That's a draw. And they get to fight a second round of combat if they choose. The British are going to hang on in there and the French are going to counterattack. It's actually 5 dice all now as the Allies have taken quite considerable casualties. How well have the French done? They have done really well. They've caused 4 casualties, the Allies only 2. The French have recaptured Gemicourt and kicked out the Highlanders. All right, let's move those figures and mark up those casualties. And one of those strange turns when we get a multiplicity of ADCs. So with all those ADCs, all French brigades are active. And indeed, we still have infantry assault on our brigade recapturing Gemicourt. And we've been able to put artillery assault on our French artillery battery here. For the Allies, the only tragedy was our heavy cavalry brigade, which rolled a double 1 despite having a reroll. So that has gone hesitant. All other Allied brigades are active, and we've got artillery assault on our double battery in the centre. All right, let's see who's got initiative. The Allies are on -1 with 1 hesitant brigade. The French get an 8. They have initiative. Let's see what they do and see if they can try and drive back this river crossing the Allies have achieved. Have chosen this moment to go all aggressive. Our 2 cuirassier regiments from this flank that were hovering at the rear of the table have taken the opportunity to charge using their cavalry charge bonus. They have taken both a casualty for crossing this hedge line at full speed, but they have crashed into the light battalion. Now these will try and form square, and they get a +1 bonus because they're veterans, and they fail. They go unformed, and that's going to be bad news for this charge result and the 71st Highlanders. On the right flank, we are not going to charge with our heavy cavalry against this British square, as the square has already formed, and we think we're going to take advantage of it by bringing it under musketry from our 2 line battalions down here. Let's see how we go as we do charge results for the French. A pretty critical roll. It is on +6 to the French. We're heavy cavalry, we're charging a line, the line's unformed, all bad news. The line does have rear and flank supports, and the cavalry charge has a rear support. So let's see how we do. Pretty indifferent rolls for both. Let's roll for the Allies first. They get a 6. We'll try and re-roll again. We get an 8 for the Allies, so not too bad. The French will re-roll one of those 2s to a 3. Terrible. This could have been a great result for the French cavalry, but not. So the cavalry have 1 by 1. So they will melee with a lan, and the Highland Light will melee unformed. Essex have decided they are going to try and charge the French in Gemicourt. Let's see how the French do. They're unformed, only 2 dice of defensive fire. They don't cause any casualties. that charge will go in, and we'll do that in the close combat section of the turn. All right, I think that's it for charge moves. Now on with normal moving with these two battalions, both be firing inferior volleys because they both moved up in the turn, and they are the target is in square, so we get 2 extra combat dice, so that's potentially quite devastating. All right, let's see how this first battalion does. Well, I can't tell which is the combat dice, so we'll have to re-roll that. Combat dice will be the red ones. Okay, so that's a 7 for an inferior volley is 1 casualty and 1 more from the combat dice. And then second one is a 9, no extra casualties from the combat dice, but for an inferior volley is 2 more casualties. So, and a discipline test. So 7 goes up to an 11. So that is really bad news for this battalion. Cornwalls are in real trouble now. That should be on 11 casualties and a discipline test at -2. They roll a 9, that takes them down to a 7, so they do stand, but they are on the point of collapse. French artillery down here is going to open up with artillery assault. It does get no casualties from its combat dice, but it does roll a 9 at effective range, which is 2 more casualties on the British battalion opposite, and a bounce through casualty as well, and a discipline test. Battalion on 11 casualties. This is really looking quite precarious for the British now, and their discipline test is good, which is probably not what they wanted, because they probably wanted to fall back. All right, that's the French artillery fired, and then we've got a French infantry volley here against the advancing lights. We roll a 6 for a standard volley at close range. Okay, and then we'll also fire an inferior volley from this battalion down here and an inferior volley from this battalion down here at the same target. That's an 11 and a 9 inferior volleys. Let's see what they can. 3 volleys, that's a discipline test at -1 and then a discipline test at -2. So at -1, a 7 is alright as they're veterans, and at -2, a 6 goes down to a 4, +1 for veterans is a 5, so the lights go unformed. The Allied return fire, we can do some artillery assault from these guns over the river. These will be at long range and at -1, and we're going against the 1st Cuirassier Regiment. So a 6, there are 2 bonus casualties. A 6 is a half a casualty, which doesn't convert, so that's 2 casualties on the Cuirassiers. And then the second battery will open fire, and it gets a 7, which will also be half a casualty. No casualties from the artillery dice, that's 1 more, so that takes the Cuirassiers up to 4 casualties, but no discipline tests. The square is out of range, so it can't fire. The infantry battalion down here is engaged in combat. The Highlanders here reformed this turn and probably won't fire into the building, no, because there's hand-to-hand combat going on in there. We do have some Allied skirmishers, so let's fire the Allied skirmishers at the French guns. That's pretty good, that's 2 casualties, but they only go up to 3, so those guns are still in a healthy state. And against this infantry battalion, 1 more casualty from the skirmishers. And then down here we've got an inferior volley from the lights as they are unformed, so this will be at -2. They lose fire discipline. All right, that's it for firing this turn. Now for some hand-to-hand combats. We've got the Chasseurs going into the building, and then we've got the Essex trying to eject the French from Gemiancourt. We'll start. Could be looking quite good for the Essex. They are on 5 dice normally, -1 for assaulting a built-up area, but +1 for being veterans. But perhaps not if they roll like that. Only 2 casualties from the Essex. The French, however, normally 5 dice. They've got 5 casualties and they're unformed, so only 3. But they do cause 2 casualties. So that is a draw, so potentially we get to fight a second round of combat. Let's see what we choose. So the French have decided to retire from Gemiancourt. It would be 6 dice to 3, as we've got 7 casualties and we're unformed, and you don't get the built-up area bonus, and the Essex have only taken 2 casualties. So the Essex storm in and have recaptured Gemiancourt Farm. This is a real seesaw affair. They're on 2 casualties, veterans, but now unformed. I'm sure the French will try and counter-attack again next turn. All right, so Gemiancourt changed hand once again. How does the French cavalry charge do? All right, let's work out the hand-to-hand combat. So the British only get 4 dice. They benefit from being a large unit and veterans, but they are unformed. And they cause 1 casualty on the French cavalry. The French cavalry are a small unit, but they are veterans. They've only got 1 casualty, and they do have a land, and they are heavy cavalry. They have caused 4 casualties to 1. They have 1 by 3. They smash the light infantry. So I think this British assault is teetering. This French cavalry counterattack seems to have been timed perfectly. Although the Allies have plenty of reserves, including the rest of the KGL and the Hanoverians, the light infantry on this flank has taken 9 casualties. The light infantry in the centre has disintegrated and collapsed under the charge of the cuirassiers, and that'll be a Falter test on this British brigade. These other British brigades, this battalion has taken 11 casualties in the front as well, so that could well be another Falter test if it's hit by the artillery this turn. In the centre here we have recaptured Gemincourt and have some reinforcements available, but the French can potentially counterattack again. They still have infantry assault orders on down here. We have another British battalion on 11 casualties, subject to infantry and a possible charge, and over here reasonably high casualties on this brigade as well. So the British assault really has been mired by the strong French defensive position. Let's see what we do as we move into turn. Both sides on activation. So our cuirassiers unfortunately went hesitant. Clearly it was that artillery fire that slammed into them last turn. But all other infantry brigades are active, and we put artillery assault on our battery in the centre, determined to do a break against one of those infantry units up here. And again, our cuirassiers and all our infantry on the left flank are active, and the French will be charging. For the Allies, all Allied units are active, but we do have our Falter test to do as a result of our infantry unit breaking in the centre. Let's see what happens following the break of the Highland Lights. We roll a 6, they obey orders. That's good news for the Allies. And let's roll for initiative. So French, -1 for a hesitant brigade. The Allies get initiative. What are they going to do this turn? For the Allies, nothing's in range for their heavy cavalry to charge. No other units can charge on the flank here. We're unformed, and everything else is out of range. For the French, we again have charged into Gemincourt with another one of our infantry battalions down here, and our cuirassiers are running amok. They've charged into this line. They're too close for the line to react. This line here has got a chance to form square. Let's see if it does, as it takes a flank charge from the cuirassiers. Allies, this will be a test at -4. 8 minus 4 is takes us down to a 4. They fail to pass the discipline test. They go unformed and are hit in the flank by the cavalry. Look at our charge results as the cuirassiers try and charge home against the rest of this British brigade. The battalion did volley as the cavalry charged home at the 3-inch point. I'll just check to make sure they can do that, but if they can, this will be a French charge at +1. French roll a 7, the 6, and the Allies roll a 7. So we'll check that, but the cuirassiers would be thrown back on that particular charge. We'll keep those results, but what we didn't do was take a test to see if they could hold the line on being charged by cavalry. So let's see what we roll. We're on an 11, so indeed they maintain the line, and the French cuirassiers take a casualty, but the strength of that Allied volley drives them back, so they are forced to retire. So that French cuirassiers charge has failed. All right, now the second one, potentially much more imposing, into the flank of the Allies and the unformed unit. Let's see how this one goes. This is how you really want to do it. So this is no less than +12 to the French. Going into the flank against a heavily damaged unit that is unformed, it's going to be a disaster. All right. So the French win by 13. That unit is broken, and they rout and disperse, and we get to charge on. Let's see where the cuirassiers go. Charge on is no less than 24, and they go into the flank of this next battalion. Let's see how they react. They roll a 3, so they retreat. They certainly go unformed and flee in front of these cavalry, and will flee off table, and the charge continues. This might be a tougher proposition. So they've broken both of those 2 infantry battalions, one dispersed and one retreated off the table. and now they've come into the British Horse Guards. Let's see how this charge results. Charge will just be a straight roll-off. Both heavy cavalry, allies are elite, veterans are the cuirassiers, but they do get the benefit of charging on, so that knocks it out. Wow, great rolls for both of them. +1, so the cavalry versus cavalry, that will lead to a melee. So we'll see how that melee goes later on in the turn, but definitely a Falter test and a broken brigade for this allied brigade in the centre. For this unformed British light battalion, bad news as they're hammered again by these French volleys. Let's do the battalion in the centre first. 3, that'll be a loss of fire discipline. The one on the right, a 7 for a standard volley, is 2 more casualties against the lights. This takes them up to 11. 11 casualties, and then we've got the other battalion firing, which is an inferior volley. A 7 is another casualty, so that's 12 casualties on that infantry battalion. And then we've got artillery assault for our battery down in the centre down here. Let me just get a couple more dice. So these guys are going to fire at the British Horse Guards that have just emerged to the front. Okay, so they get 1 casualty, but they do lose a casualty through a fatigue test, and they can no longer do artillery assault, but that is 1 casualty on those British guns. Firing against this poor beleaguered square. Again, I don't think they're going to last too long. Let me just get some dice. All right, okay, so opening up a standard volley first from this line battalion, and you get 2 casualty dice because they're in square. That gives us the 1 casualty we need. That battalion disperses. This will be a Falter test on the brigade holding Gemicourt. So the British skirmishers and artillery are fired. We cause 1 more casualty on our cuirassiers down here, but otherwise most of the fire was pretty ineffectual. We do have to fire against these French guns. It does look like we need to withdraw this battery now. It's taken quite a pounding. And then 1 more shot from the British skirmishers there. 1 more casualty on this battalion. And that is it. All right, that's all the firing done in the turn. So the square in the centre has been wiped out, and we saw the devastating result of the charges. Let's see how the infantry combat goes here as we charge in with yet another fresh battalion against the Essex, who are holding the village. The Essex will get 5 dice to start with, 4 because they are unformed. The French attack with 5 dice. But go down to 4 because they're attacking a strong point. Let's see how we do. All right, the Allies win. The Allies throw the French back. That's a good result for the Essex. Rolling for the cuirassiers. The British heavy cavalry have the advantage down here because they are elite. So let's see how we do. Oh yeah, it's going to be a good result for the Allies. 3 casualties to the cuirassiers. On the cuirassiers, only 1 on the British. Those cuirassiers will be thrown. Got a couple of hesitant French brigades, but that's the one on the far left flank and the one on the far right flank. But our infantry brigades and our cavalry are all active. And all the Allied brigades are active apart from the completion of their Falter tests. So let's do the Falter tests for the brigade in the centre. We have given them a reroll. These are the ones holding Gemicourt. It's a savoir-faire, that's not good. A 6, they obey orders, they stay in Gemicourt, that's good. And then for our broken brigade, they also obey orders. Let's just check. I'm not sure a broken brigade can pass a Falter test, so I will just check. Charges this turn, so the British Life Guard are trying to support the position in Gemicourt. They've charged the guns on this flank. The French are again attacking Gemicourt with this brigade that's had theirs as repeated objective this turn. That's it for charges. Let's see how these charges. So unfortunately for the French, they're not under artillery assault. We didn't have the ADCs to do that. That's from last turn, and they will do this. Close range canister as the Life Guard charge in. We roll an 8. That goes down to a 7 because we are have suffered a significant number of casualties. Column, are they in column? No, they're not in column. We don't count those as columns in our games. So that is simply a 7. So close range is 2 casualties on the cavalry and, importantly, a discipline test. We will also forget a supporting volley from our infantry battalion here. Let's see how they do against the infantry, against the cavalry as they pass across their front. A 7, again not too bad, a standard volley. So that is 4 casualties on the cavalry unit. An elite unit, but they'll have to take a discipline test. Wow, a double 1, that's a disaster. That really does sum up the Allies. So that's a discipline test, straight double 1. I'm sure that's not going to be good news. So for the French, we stayed in position on this flank. We actually did a voluntary retire with our cavalry unit that was out in the middle of the field. They fell back, they took an extra casualty, but they're now behind their colleagues behind the ridgeline. This French infantry brigade has started moving forward to shield its guns, potentially drive off the Allied skirmishers. We've got the combat going on in the village. The French infantry continues to move back towards the riverline, and the heavy cavalry on the right flank is starting to deploy to potentially provide support against the mass of elite British heavy cavalry that is on their left. All right, let's see how the combat for the village plays. All right, let's see the assault as the French try and regain the village. All right, the Allies only cause 1 casualty, the French cause 2. Let's see what they do. Will the Allies persist in defending the stronghold? Try and hang on to Jumoncourt, but the French have the slight advantage. Let's see how they do. All right, they cause 2 casualties. The Allies cause 1. The French regain Jumoncourt. See how the volleys do down here. So Allies volleyed first, an inferior volley as we're in double line. 6 is 1 casualty against the French. French will now fire back. So main battalion gets a 7 for a standard volley, is 2 casualties. The next battalion gets a 6, which makes it up to 3 casualties. And then we've got an inferior volley, which is an 8, is 2 more casualties. That's 5 casualties on the light. And I think that will cause them to break as well. I think we're going to call it there. I think it looks irretrievable for the Allies. I know they have their Hanoverian reserves, but the French defensive position looks still in very good state, certainly on this left flank. This brigade here with only 1 battalion left is broken. The KGL were unable to progress onto the table. We do have the British heavy cavalry, but I did deploy that extremely badly, putting it over on that flank, although it proved effective and drove off those French cuirassiers who are now back on the French baseline. It didn't actually break that cuirassier brigade, and the forlorn charge against the French guns proved insufficient. There's still plenty of hitting power with that French heavy cavalry, but there's no real infantry available to support it. Jumoncourt has been recaptured, and we still have French battalions, although they're now quite heavily damaged, 4, 7, 7 and 4 casualties. So this brigade's taken a lot of grief trying to get into the building, but again we have 1 healthy Highland battalion left, but these other 2 are either retreating or have taken heavy casualties. The French have re-established the line on the right. They have heavy cavalry domination on the right, and the Allies really won't be able to push them out. So I think on that basis we have to say French General Tripship has triumphed. I did a pretty disastrous job of commanding the British, so apologies to all British supporters here, but the French have held the line, and the attempts by Wellington to relieve Blucher's position have been thrown back. Wellington will retire on Brussels. Can Blucher survive on his own against Napoleon and the Guard? Watch out for the final combination of this campaign in the next battle we have to show. Cheers everyone, hope you enjoyed it, and see you all soon.